All right, welcome back. We are here with another amazing clinician, Colin Sutton. Did I say your name correctly?
Oh, you did. You did. Nice.
Yeah.
I was like thinking, like, oh, amazing clinician. Thanks. Thanks.
Yes, this amazing clinician, Mr. Colin, who we have here again with L.O.V.E Inc., learning to overcome various life experiences. And we realize that the only way to overcome is through love. And we're here again. The entire month of October will be featuring clinicians sharing different tips that will help us navigate through the uncertainties that we are experiencing right now in the midst of COVID, loss, and just loss of everything. So without further ado, Mr. Colin, welcome.
Hey.
So my very first question for you is, why did you become a clinician?
Oof. Okay. So I'll try to be succinct for that story, but frankly, it started off when I was actually introduced in therapy in high school, because high school was just a rough period for me. I mean, I was Black in a predominantly white Catholic school, so already there, and like usually oftentimes like being the only Black person in class or what have you, whatnot. So that, and on top of being like identifying as queer at the time, like it was just a struggle, whatnot. So I ended up in therapy for issues around depression and things like that. And I really liked my therapist. He was an older Black gentleman and whatnot, and I really like. He actually he sort of made me into a critical thinker, which has helped me a lot throughout my life. The only problem is like I didn't quite learn how to shut it off. So I got the skills to really start to look at things a little bit more between the lines and look at things through different lenses and whatnot in my life and the experiences that I was going through and whatnot, and really starting to like ask the question about, for me and myself, like, what does Blackness mean to me and what have you. And so like I tried a few other things. Like I went to college for like, creative writing fiction. I went like, and I always had an interest in like psychology and sexuality stuff and whatnot. And so I even like after I graduated from college, like I ended up at a law firm, like, post college and whatnot for 2 years, like working my life away with no joy or whatever, whatnot, in this law firm and whatnot, because it just wasn't what I was meant to be doing. It wasn't what I was really called to be doing. And I found myself there listening to a lot of people's stuff. And I've always been a listener and whatnot. And I think I get that from my mother, because she tends to listen to a lot of people's stuff too. But like, I realized like at this law firm, I was listening to a lot of people's like stuff around like struggles with their kids, experiences they had like in growing up or whatnot in their past. They don't want necessarily anybody else to like find out for professional reasons, like finding out about like people struggling in their marriages and whatnot, all this other stuff. And this was all like not that long before the 2008 market crash and whatnot. So I know I'm like giving my age a little bit there, but I realized at that point that I'm like, what am I doing? This is not what I'm supposed to be doing, like, and whatnot, working in this law firm. And it's like, and it just seemed like everything just kept coming back to social work. Everything kept coming back to therapy and whatnot. So that is when I looked into graduate school and then applied and got in. And so I walked away from grad school with a master's in social work and a master's in human sexual education. And really, my goal was just to really just be able to listen and bear witness to people's experiences and whatnot, and to essentially help them sort of reauthor and redefine who they are to the best, to being their best self, which may not always be in agreement or in line with everybody else, but really just helping them to find fulfillment in their own lives and be more in alignment with their own purpose. So yeah.
That is powerful. Thank you so much. And thank you for knowing when to shift. Because I think that is something that, a lot of people, even myself at times, struggle with. If, you're in a position, you're unhappy, this isn't what you're called to do, but, knowing and acting on that is really important. And timing is everything, I believe.
Right. And I will say that like that, I mean, I have had to relearn to when to shift as well, because I have had to even shift throughout this career and realize like, okay. And there was a big pivotal moment where I had to realize my career was like, I'm definitely going in the wrong direction. Like I had to learn the difference between like, this isn't working for me versus what I'm doing is sort of what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm not supposed to be doing it here or in this setting or this or what have you. So pivoting is a complex thing where it's like, it's not just like, okay, like it's like a catch-all, it's like here or over here or whatnot. But sometimes it's like, okay, maybe I need to move in like gradients and whatnot. So yes, but it is a very important life lesson, and we often will have to learn that we have to pivot quite a few times in our lives. So just want to add that.
Perfect. Well, what is your advice for knowing when to seek professional mental health help?
Okay. My first thought is, if you are asking yourself the question, chances are you probably should be going about looking for a therapist. Also, because you may not necessarily be aware that there might be an issue, but if you find yourself bumping up into the same issues and you find yourself and you find whatever the situation is not working out for you and whatnot, and you can't figure out why, and you're not getting useful feedback in your support networks or what have you, or if you don't even have a support network and whatnot, it might be time to start looking at how to reframe your situation, as well as figuring out what resources you may actually have access to that you may not quite readily think that are available to you. If you just want to do some more deep work about, particularly most people tend to change that. A lot of people tend to come in the context of thinking about in terms of relationships or something like that, as I'm working out why do I keep running up into this roadblock? And it's like, okay, well, let's really maybe not look at why the relationship didn't work, but what's going on with you in interaction with this said relationship. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's a romantic relationship. It could be a friendship. It could be why is it I'm having issues maintaining friendships or things like that? Because sometimes the issue could be something that's going on with behavior patterns that you may have learned that may not be quite conducive, but also maybe a time where you recognize okay, maybe it's me. I need to recognize that some people are not always for me or what have you. And sometimes that's a hard lesson that we have to learn too, that not everybody's for us, but we also have to take that time to be wanting to be accountable to ourselves as well as others as well too. So I would say that if you feel like you're in particular anxiety, a lot of anxiety, a lot of distress, if you notice that just things in your life just aren't quite working out for whatever reason, and you just feel like there's something else going on here, looking further into that. And lastly, if you know that you've had a family history or anything like that with mental health or stuff like that, that will also be maybe I should take some time to look into this for me as well too. But if you just notice that you're in a high amount of distress, really, and if you definitely are feeling okay, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling down, I don't want to get out of bed or things like that, those are also indicators and whatnot that maybe you might need to look at a little bit further about what's going on.
Thank you very much for those responses. What would you say is one myth about seeking therapy?
Just one? Okay.
You can share more.
Okay, one. Well, the big one is that, and it depends on each therapist's approach, but the big one is that okay, people come in to the therapist expecting fix me, and it's we're supposed to just oh, also fix me, and also the fact that this should take no more than 2 or 3 sessions. That depends on the issue. Some sessions some people only need 1 or 2 sessions. That happens. Some people just need short-term therapy. A lot of people need more than that, and it's going to be definitely more than 3 or 4 sessions. So I think one myth is that, okay, this is going this fix me. This should be happening right now on my time, and it's one, we're not here to fix you. We're to help you. We're here to help you sort of cope and deal and look at your life differently, and you make the choices and decisions about what needs to change in there. We're helping you with that because you're the one. This is your life. You're taking ownership of it. We're not. Any therapist tells you that they can fix you, whatever like that, you should be aware of that. So, so that piece, and then also, what's the other myth that tends to pop up a lot too? A lot of people tend to feel well, if I'm going to therapy, that automatically means I'm crazy. No, because most people who seek therapy are people who are just dealing with everyday struggles in terms that may intersect, or what we call intersectionality, in terms of layers of their lives. So what does it mean to be for that person who's dealing with a bad relationship? What does it mean to be a Black woman and dealing with work stress and things like that, and feeling oftentimes you're you're narrated or storied as someone who's aggressive when really you're just expressing how you feel or things like that. But navigating the system, navigating the U.S. essentially as a person of color, or none doesn't even have to be a person of color, but just simply navigating life and stressors and whatnot. So with that, when I'd say that myth about the idea of like being like, am I crazy for coming to therapy? Like, no, not necessarily. And I would say most people who come to therapy are everyday average people who don't have like really severe mental health issues, but just have a lot of life stressors that are going on that are impacting them, and they just need some additional support with that, and just a space to just kind of like be themselves and to sometimes vent, and then sometimes like, okay, I call it spilling out the puzzle pieces essentially onto the table, and then like figure out like how can we organize this or reorganize your life in a way that is going to be a better fit for you. So
I really like that puzzle piece analogy. Like that was amazing. I think it really does sum up life. You know, sometimes we do have, and life can hand us just a jumbled up puzzle, a giant puzzle with a million pieces. And, you know, we become overwhelmed with trying to figure out or not getting the pieces correctly aligned or fit together. You know,
and with that, also, I'm going to say like self-care becomes a big topic that I often end up having to discuss with clients about, and about that, but particularly like, because a lot of people feel like, well, self-care, like, okay, that means being selfish or that kind of thing. And yet we're in the space of talking oftentimes about love and self-love and whatnot. And I have had to express several times like, self-care is self-love. Like, and it doesn't always mean that necessarily that it means like, okay, self-care means like, okay, spa and bubble baths and things like that. Self-care can also mean knowing when to set proper boundaries, knowing when to say no, knowing when, okay, I want to do this because it feels good, but knowing that this decision is actually the better one for me and whatnot, and taking the better path and whatnot. So self-care can look like a lot of different things, but self-care is self-love. So I just also want to add that too.
Love it. You are dropping some nuggets. Oh my gosh. I love it. I love it. I love it. Self-care is self-love. All right. So what can you share a benefit or several benefits of therapy? I think you already highlighted some, but if there are any others that you did not mention, you know, what would you say are the true benefits of therapy?
Honestly, doing that deep work would take, or sometimes maybe not, doesn't necessarily be like the deep work, but honestly, sometimes therapy can just give you basic skills that you may need just to navigate difficult situations. Therapy really helps people. In my opinion, the best benefit of therapy is that it helps you develop a lot of sense of self-awareness. And if you allow it to, and that's the thing with therapy, like, and maybe that goes back to the missing, like the idea that folks think like, if you, therapy really is one of those things where you get out what you put in. Like if you're coming in and you're not being serious about doing this work, because it's going to require, usually it's going to require a bit of you. If you're not really serious about it, then you're not going to get that much out of it. And so I would say that one of the benefits of it is that being like allowing yourself to just develop more sense of self-awareness, being more in tune with your needs and desires and your wants, and what overall you need essentially to have a more fulfilling life. That may also involve making hard decisions and whatnot, which is very uncomfortable for all of us. And I feel like this day and age, we don't always like to talk about making those challenging decisions and whatnot, but sometimes we do need to make those hard decisions because it's going to pay off in the long run. And it may be painful. And also, that's the thing too, therapy is not always going to be comfortable. It's not always going to be comfortable for everybody. Like if it's too easy, that could be a good thing because one, you're just putting a lot of work into this. But there should always be some sort of challenging moments in therapy for you, depending on what you're seeking and whatnot. So, I would say therapy helps people with the idea of being challenged and how to accept or reframe adversity when they encounter as well too.
I like that, reframing adversity.
Which ain't always easy to do. It's not always easy to do.
No,
especially right now, like it is not. It is not easy to do.
It is not. Alrighty. So, what, if any, resources can you think of, or what are some resources that you can offer, or resources that you can share with other people that may, um, either be ready to, they're thinking about, okay, I think it's time I need to see a therapist, or what resources can you share with them?
Okay, so one is always therapy for Black girls is always a good resource, particularly for Black women. There's also a therapy for Black men as well as website as well too. And then there is also Open Path Collective, and that's another therapy site for like low cost. If you're looking for low cost therapy in your area, that you can go in there by zip code and whatnot and find out what's in your area, like therapists that may be charging on a reduced fee or on a sliding scale or what have you. Particularly if you don't have if you're having having issues with the means of affording therapy and whatnot. So there's a lot of places that do try to offer low cost therapy as well too. If you have insurance and things like that, like I would suggest going to Psychology Today, particularly as one place, particularly to look for therapists in your area. And if you have your insurance, particularly if you have like any of the major insurance, like any of the major insurance carriers and whatnot, there, like you can actually look up therapists, like plenty of therapists in your zip code area, and particularly right now since we're still in the pandemic, and social distancing and whatnot, the vast majority of therapists are seeing clients virtually. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you're necessarily limited to your zip code. You can actually see anyone you want in your state, as long as they're licensed to provide services in your state. So those are some readily ones I would say in terms of like trying to access therapy. You can also use like things like the Calm.com app, or the Liberate app for meditation and things like that too as well. There was another one that I had just found out about, called, I think Up or whatever like that, for positive affirmations and whatnot too. So those are other options as well too, for just also I want to say like BetterHelp as well is another one for those who are looking for therapy but may not necessarily have the means to afford like more expensive therapists or whatnot in the area and that kind of thing too. So that's another one. And Talkspace as well too. So those are other options as well too that folks can look at.
Thank you. That was great. I will take a look at some of these myself. Because we need it, self-care, and I think that's something that I struggle with, is really taking time for myself. I'm always doing and doing and doing for everyone else. And
Right. And I think people of color particularly are conditioned to operate in that space, and it's really only been like a recent sort of discussion that we've been having about how we need to take care of ourselves and how we are, because oftentimes like we're storied I feel like we're storied that particularly in the larger discussion and discourse in our society, like, okay, we are either treated as subhuman, where we're not valued as actual human beings, or we story ourselves, or sometimes we're stored as superhuman. So like even with the things like Black Girl Magic, Black Boy Joy, and whatnot, like, don't be wrong, I love both of those. I'm celebrating both of those. But I feel like sometimes like we get caught into this resiliency trap and whatnot with that, whereas we know that we can endure, we know that we're strong, and we know all these things, and yet we are still human people. We are still human beings. And when I'm forgetting that between that subhuman and that superhuman, we have a hard time being allowed or giving ourselves the permission to just be human when we're going through things and whatnot. And so self-care is another piece about why I emphasize that, because like you are a person and you do deserve to take care of yourself the way that you take care of other people.
thank you. That's definitely important. I've definitely learned the power of saying no.
I've
And
been learning it too. Yeah, yes.
it's hard, and initially it was very difficult for me to say no. And I'm like, okay, there are two it's, just a simple word, but it's not so simple when you are expected to always be there, or expected to
Right,
show up in this place.
right.
So it definitely, it begins to hurt a little bit, but as I began to say no, I started saying yes a lot more to myself, and
Right.
In doing so, I found more peace. And
Also, right, peace. Oh my God, peace. You cannot even how much you can't. Oh my God, the price of peace. But like even with that, like just the fact of like it's no, and I will definitely. I'm with you on that about saying no. Like that's been something I've had to learn and relearn and whatnot. But as you start to say no more to things, like and again, you say yes more to yourself, like you start realizing that some of those things you were saying no to, you're kind of like, no, I'm really actually okay with the fact that I said no to that. Like you start getting more comfortable with the idea. I'm like, no, I have a better sense of understanding what my needs are, and I'm honoring those needs versus the expectations that others have on me. So,
perfect. Can you share one or two tips for coping with dealing with trauma, anxiety, and stress?
first, take a deep breath. Like, take a deep breath and give yourself at least 5 or 10 minutes to just be in the space that you are at the very least. Like, you owe yourself that much to honor your feelings and where you are. And the next piece I would say is honestly be patient with yourself. Um, particularly right now. And I think it's very hard to for folks to really hear that right now because before all this, we were very much people were like, I'm going, 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 gone. I got 6 different things to do. I got this, that, and the other, da 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 da. And then particularly in the early parts of the quarantine, like folks were like anxiety was really high. Anxiety is still very high, but like particularly when things were like I want to say like April, May, June, like folks were really like when we didn't we're still learning about the virus and whatnot, but when we had even less knowledge about the virus, people were just all over the place in terms of anxiety and depression and whatnot, and particularly around this idea of productivity, which is also its own trap, but that I'll say that for another day. But this idea of like, I need to be doing all these things, I need to be producing and whatnot. And I think a lot of folks have had to learn that this is a time to like really again, going back to self-care, take care of yourself. Recognizing that like, wait, I was going, going, gone. Hold on, what were all these needs that I realized that I didn't take care of? Like some people are realizing that like, wait a minute, I don't like my job. Wait a minute, this isn't the career that I wanted to be in. Or you know what, this relationship is no longer working. Or maybe I need to tend to my relationship a bit more because I've been doing all these other things and I haven't really been nurturing myself. I haven't been certainly not nurturing the relationship with myself or nurturing the relationship with others. So this is, I would say, definitely this piece is like, be patient with yourself and be patient in the midst of all of this because this is an unprecedented space that we're all existing in right now, at least for anyone in our lifetimes at this point. Like for vast majority of us, it's the first time we've been in a pandemic and whatnot. And so in a pandemic and a very problematic government at the moment and just a lot of people's needs just overall, like a lot of unemployment and things like that, like a lot of people's needs just not getting met right now. So be patient with yourself. If anything, if I can stress is like, be patient, and it's okay that you're feeling frustrated, sad. If you find yourself vacillating between all the different emotions, you're just being like most other humans. So those would be the things that I would say right now.
Thank you. Patience with self.
Mm-hmm.
I struggle. I have patience with other people, especially you. Adults, not so much, but youth, I have all the patience.
Me too. Me too. I've had infinite patience for the young folks.
Yes, indeed. So with that, what advice would you give to young people? Going through this pandemic, people in college, and just everything. What advice would you give to a young person?
Oof. First, going back to that, be patient with yourself. 1, 2. This is the time to actually, and it may sound like honestly, start trying to explore some of those interests that you never got to, or really focusing on your passions or whatnot. Like young folks have an abundance of energy in a lot of ways, and they channel it towards all these really crazy, zany, interesting things, which is why working with youth has always been one of the many reasons why it's always been enjoyable to me. I would still say be mindful about be mindful about social distancing with your friends and whatnot. I know you want to be around them and all that stuff. Like just think about your impact in this. Think about like who you're exposing yourself to and that kind of stuff. Also focus on honing those social supports and whatnot, your friends and your family and loved ones. But, you know, being mindful in all of this. I'm going to say that my hope is that we're all going to get through this. I think that we really all can. I think it's going to be, it continues to be a challenge. And I think particularly a challenge with, you know, the struggles around the civil unrest and the lives lost, you know, to police violence and things like that. And I think, again, in the midst of this pandemic and all this stuff, and those are all very real issues that people are grappling with right now. And I think in the midst of all that, try to find things that bring you joy as well, too, and bring you rest as well, because those things, those acts, particularly as students of color, but just for anybody too, like those acts can be revolutionary in their own right. So find those things that are meaningful to you. Find those hobbies or passion projects. Continue to interact with your friends and family safely. And when I rely on those support networks, and it's okay when you're feeling, even if those things are still fulfilling, but you still find yourself feeling lonely or down or struggling with what's going on or frustrated. Again, all of that is not out of the norm. Those are normal responses. Like if you were going, like the concern about, and going back to like the piece of like, maybe if you're considering going to therapy or not, like if you're not having any type of reaction to what's been going on, that would also be a sign maybe you might want to consider going to therapy, because it's totally normal that if you're having a reaction to everything that's going on. So that would be my advice, is to just, yeah, focus on those things that bring you joy.
Perfect. Thank you, Colin. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or just any other question that I did not ask that you just want to?
Oh, lastly, if you do find yourself like, because this is a heightened period of time of like depression, anxiety, and frustration, and what have you, like, you know, risk and safety can also be up to. So I don't remember the number, but I would definitely say look up the National Suicide Hotline if you find things are getting that severe, or call 911 if you find yourself in a mental health emergency or things like that. I do want to express that too, because depending on the situation and whatnot, like, you know, it can be really severe, and people, you know, may need the appropriate care that may come with that. So, yeah.
That is true. And thank you. And again, thank you, Colin, for your time and for being here,
My
sharing,
pleasure.
you know, just tips. I learned a lot of things just from what you shared, and I'll be putting them into practice. looking up some stuff myself, and
Okay.
really, you know, really needing and knowing when, you know, you need help.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been critical for me, and I know that during this time, you know, I have been just overwhelmed with a lot, and
That is
and gardening really has been what I've used as therapy.
that is a good one. And sometimes I would say like that, working with soil and working with those tangible things like that can also be a tip to kind of help relieve stress and things like that. So like I say usually, like if you have thinking putty, or if you have access to like a little small sand tray or something like that, but soil is also a good. So that's great that you got into gardening. That's really good, really a good one.
I had to, and I found that it's just peaceful connecting with
Mm-hmm.
nature.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for me, I go out there and I talk to my plants, and, you know, just like with anything, people need nourishment to grow, and
Mm-hmm.
the same with plants. So I look at my plants and I'm like, okay, Melanie, how am I nourishing other people? Or how am I, you know, am I a good addition, or is, you know, my attitude or what I'm feeling, is it negatively impacting someone? So I'm always very self-conscious, and I try to
But
always.
also asking Melanie, are you nourishing yourself too in that? Making
Mm,
sure, because you went straight to other people, but like I'm like, are you nourishing yourself? Because if you can't serve from an empty plate, you know?
mhm. Thank you. Yes. Yes, I am. I am learning to nourish myself. I'm learning to nourish myself and learning to really take time. And I'll be honest with that. Like that really was a struggle for me. I would just give
Mm.
and give and give and give and give and just do and do and do. And it's like, okay, what am I pouring back in? And
I
that's what
remember because we were in some of those same trenches together now. So
yeah,
like I
yeah,
know what it meant to like give, 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 and not quite give back to yourself. And that's in some of those spaces like, whoo Lord, because we were trying to help a lot of people.
yes,
We're trying to help a lot of people with a lot of stuff, a lot of real stuff. So
real stuff. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. But thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I hope it won't be the last time.
oh
And
no,
again,
thank you for
like
having me.
I really feel and I hope that the people that are listening to this, once we post it, that you will get something from this and see yourself and really know that it's okay to not be okay. And
Mm,
it's okay to feel what you feel, but know when it's time to seek help and
mm-hmm,
know when you know that self-care is not selfish and
mm-mm.
that we just need to continue to nourish self
Mm,
in order to then nourish our assignment, right?
mm, mm,
Whatever our assignment is. And our assignments are different and they vary. And success is very different for everyone. So don't measure your success to anyone else's. Um,
can I add one last thing too
of course.
with that? Since you've said that, also take a break from social media because that's where the comparison game gets really strong is when you're looking on the gram on Instagram or Twitter or sometimes on Facebook. I know the young folks don't really like care about Facebook as much, but like Instagram, like all those other ones, like people can make their lives look a certain way when in reality there's a lot of other stuff going on. That's just a snapshot of what's going on in that actual instance. That doesn't necessarily mean that their lives are great or hunky-dory or whatnot. So it's okay to take a break from. As a matter of fact, it's good. I implore you to take to take a break from social media, especially in this time. Yes. So I just want to add that there too.
That is so true. And I think I try to be very transparent because I don't want
Mhm.
people to feel like I am acting like I'm big on positivity. I stay positive because I know that I know the benefits for myself because if I dwell on the negativity, then it's going to change. It's going to affect everything.
Mm,
I have to, and that's always been my thing, just looking for something positive in the midst of chaos or whatever it is
mm.
and focusing on that thing to be able to get me through. And
That's
but
okay. Find your anchor. Yeah.
yeah, finding your anchor and going from there.
Mm,
But yes, definitely encourage everybody. Don't look at what other people do. And, everyone has struggles. And if they tell you they don't, they are lying. We are all going through something.
all
But
through
the key
something.
word is through. The choice is up to us whether we remain in what we're going through and and just realizing that it's okay again to not be okay and to really feel and I think you mentioned a really great point too. It's like where you said, well, if you aren't feeling anything, then that may be an indicator that you do need to seek some help too, because sometimes we numb ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
numb ourselves to the experiences or our surroundings, and we aren't feeling anything. And I don't
Right.
think that that's healthy.
Right, and that means that's also like if you find yourself, you notice that your alcohol intake has increased, which they have reported several times throughout the pandemic that U.S. alcohol consumption has drastically increased in the midst of all this, like recreational drugs, things like that. Like if you find yourself doing those things where you normally didn't before, just to get through, that is also a sign to also seek help too. So I'm glad you brought that back up, Melanie.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And thank you all that are going to be listening to this. Again, we hope you got something from this and you were listening to an interview with Colin Sutton, an amazing therapist
Oh, thanks.
and my colleague and, and friend. Um, Thank you again for agreeing to sit down and, learning to overcome various life experiences. We
Mm,
are an empowerment organization really seeking to help people raise the bar in their lives. That's our
Mhm.
mission. Believe, achieve, and receive. We
Hmm.
can do it, but we must believe it first and reach to it. So we're hoping that these tools and these things that we're bringing to you will be able to help you um, move on to your next level, whatever that level is for you. Thank you all for listening, and you all have a good time.
Night.